Hi everyone, I wasn't here yesterday. It's very nice to be here now. I started as a PhD student within the Seedbox Research School in September 4 years ago, 2015. And next week I'm supposed to send all my whole manuscript for my thesis to proofread. So it feels kind of symbolic in a way to be back here right now, where it all started, before kind of sending my thesis or my PhD baby into the world, or out the world. And this being said, I hope you will understand when I tell you that I'm under some time pressure here at the moment. And because of that, I decided not to make a very traditional presentation where I kind of tell you everything about my result, because I'm kind of sick of thinking about my result at the moment. To be honest, I will speak about them. I will say something about them, of course, but not much. Instead, I decided to focus on the theme of this conference, namely modes of thinking and being ecological. And I will try to approach the theme of my research, namely sufficiency, from that perspective. And I believe it to be an important thought exercise, because to me, to find those modes of thinking and being ecological is very much, to me, it's very much what really lies at the core of environmental humanities. And what's also fundamental to, in order, or to find those and to understand those is fundamental also in order to address the ecological crisis that we're facing. And I hope it can also be a good way of kind of tying the strengths of my PhD experience and research together. When I started my PhD studies, I did so after having worked in the NGO sector in Sweden for quite some years, and not having studied in about 7 years. And I can admit I didn't know that there even was a discipline called environmental humanities. In fact, I had never heard of environmental humanities until I read about the available PhD positions within the Seedbox project. And reading that, I remember that it was as if so much fell into place of what I had been working with and for the past couple of years, and what had the kind of issues that I had been interested in. I kind of realized that, this environmental humanities, it's where it all come together, so to speak. It's the meeting place of so many crucial and critical issues of our time. And right then and there, I decided that this is the type of research that I really wanted to do. Because back when I was writing I'm going to take you way back now, when I was writing my bachelor thesis in political science, I remember struggling very much with the notions of sustainability and justice, using a lot of the literature on political ecology and environmental justice that seemed to encapsulate a lot of what I found relevant. But there was something that I kind of missed, and I felt frustrated in regards to what I experienced as a lack of proposals that could actually address the need to change our way of thinking and being, or proposals that could go beyond a critique of the capitalist system and its injustices, to also address culture and ways of relating to others, and relate to nature. And then somewhere in the midst of this struggle, I found this quote by Wolfgang Sachs, which has kind of stayed with me since then. And he says that in future, for industrialized countries and classes, justice will be about learning how to take less rather than how to give more. Whoever calls for equity will have to speak for sufficiency. And to me, back then, it seemed so simple somehow, so obvious. Efficiency is simply not enough when there are limits to that which is to be shared. And if there's no more to give from, since the Earth's resources is not like an ever-expanding cake, as we all know, then of course we, as the affluent of the world, need to learn how to take less, a lot less. But as we all know, the seemingly simple is in reality a complex web of unsustainable habits and practices, of convenience, of infrastructure upholding and sustaining those unsustainable habits, of norms and cultures, of political and corporate interests and power, and of an economic system that has locked us into a dependence upon economic growth, very much fueled by a continuation of our overconsumption. So, how are the post-industrialized countries and the affluent groups and individuals of the world to learn how to take less, to truly accept this inevitable need of withdrawal from their share of the cake, which has seemed natural, so to speak, albeit very unfairly large? And that question has stayed with me since then. So when I got the chance 10 years later to do a PhD and choose a topic for my research, I decided that I wanted to learn more about sufficiency and look deeper into what the concept could mean as an idea and what shapes it could take, both in practice and in politics. Now, sufficiency as an idea and as a logic can provide guidance in a way for an ecological way of both living and being. Because thinking about sufficiency reminds us that there are ecological limits to be respected. And there are planetary boundaries to keep within. That's kind of embedded in the very essence of sufficiency, to think of a kind of good and enough approach. Thomas Princeton has been writing extensively about sufficiency, and he explains this when he argues for the need of new social organizing principles that can work to address environmental criticality. And he argues that, quote, a different set of principles are needed, a set that embodies social restraint as the logical analog to ecological constraint, a set that guides human activities when those activities pose grave risks to human survival, unquote. And then he goes on to describe in which ways sufficiency can constitute one such guiding principle. And he and many others argue for sufficiency as kind of a new societal logic, as a foundation for politics and economics and organization of the society. Besides emphasizing ecological limits, sufficiency, the concept of sufficiency also tells us something about the crucial importance of sharing that limited space, safe space of humanity that is ours to work within. And in that way, it very clearly links also the issues of sustainability and justice, and therefore can be said to not only address how to think ecologically, but also how to relate to others. Departing from an understanding of sufficiency in line with this quote by Sachs, and an understanding of sustainability as the need of staying within the planetary boundaries, I have in my research used the social connection model developed by Iris Young to arrive at a definition of sufficiency as a responsibility, and as the responsibility of refraining from taking. And that is a responsibility on the that falls on the affluent parts of the world, or on the affluent of the world, individuals, groups, societies. And what do I mean refrain from taking? It's to withdraw from one's excess environmental space that one is occupying, or to step back. And this responsibility can be shouldered both on an individual level and on a societal level, and is, I believe, a critical reason for why sufficiency can be claimed to be an ecological mode of both thinking and being. Because being ecologically means to be in relationship with others and in independence with others and other species. And such a mode, therefore, needs to somehow include responsibility or responsibility for one's action and care for others, be it ecosystems, humans, or non-humans. Now, one thing about sufficiency that I very quickly realized when I got deeper into the literature is that it can be applied in basically all areas of life. Its sufficiency as a principle might very well be used as a kind of guiding logic for the organization of society, but it can also be applied in regards to food consumption, transportation, work hours, income, housing, technology use, consumption and production, and so in all areas. But I have chosen to limit my focus on sufficiency in my research more specifically to the area of material consumption. And I chose to do so not only because that area targets one specific source of serious environmental and social impact, namely overconsumption, but it also has very much to tell us about our culture and values, behavior and ways of thinking. So the research questions that I have departed from are these 5 ones. The more overarching question is how an affluent society can orient itself towards sufficiency. And then in the base of 2 case studies on sufficiency-related practices, I ask how these practices can change the way that people view material belongings and wants and needs, and also how it might change how people perform material consumption. I further ask what these case studies can say about the possible development of a sense of sufficiency among affluent consumers, and about the potential of sufficiency-related practices to spread to a more mainstream public. And last but not least, I ask how planning and politics can facilitate this transition to a more sufficiency-oriented society and way of life. The sufficiency-related practices that I have studied are both practices that kind of approach sufficiency from above, so from a position of having or consuming more, to one of having or consuming less. So the first group I've looked at is a group of individuals who have decided to undertake a buy nothing year. And the second group is a group of individuals that have wanted to declutter their homes using the very specific KonMari method of decluttering developed by Marie Kondo. There's a lot to say about the results of these practices, but some of them, or I could say in overall, the results point to that sufficiency-related practices can change both our attitudes in regards to the things that we own, and our attitudes towards the consumption of new things. So they can also further work to change our behavior, even if we don't intend them to. So in the case of the KonMariers studied here, their intention going into this practice did not have anything to do with reducing their consumption. They wanted a more harmonious home, so to speak, with less clutter. So the buy nothing practitioners want to stop consuming, whereas the KonMariers had no intention really of doing so, but as it turns out, their practice of discarding belongings with this special method led to them eventually ceasing to want consuming new things. So what that case study shows is that individuals can actually find themselves in a position of having actually reduced their consumption without it being their original intention to do so, but still very much enjoying to be there. So this suggests that an unintentional entry into a more sufficient consumption practice can eventually become both a voluntary and an intentional one. Both these practices have spurred a lot of reflections among the practitioners about what it is that they really need, and in the case of the Callmeriers, what it is that spark joy to them. And so the informants have not simply executed, so to speak, their decisions to stop buying and to discard their belongings, but doing so has to a high degree been a very active and conscious process that has served, that has not really stopped at the reflection or at the level of material things, but it has expanded into other areas of their lives. And extended to questions such as, what do I really want to do with my life? What do I want to dedicate my time to? How can I live even simpler or with even fewer things? And a more existential level, like what is it that really matters in life? So this is a profound process that suggests that it's the changed ways of thinking about and performing consumption will persist more long term, even though more follow-up studies are needed to say something about that. And I think these quotes can say something about perhaps the development of a sense of sufficiency among the practitioners. This is the one of in the Buy Nothing group who talks about freedom from owning, and how owning in itself ties up energy. And this is a woman from the Callmer group who spoke about how everything becomes more difficult when it comes to shopping right now because she can't choose. And she compares this trying to find a new sweater with trying to find a new partner. You have such high demands that you just stay single for the rest of your life. So that makes consumption of new things quite difficult in a way. In regards to politics then, there's a political responsibility to shoulder the responsibility of sufficiency, but also to make sure that the society overall reduces its environmental impact, so steps back. So I have identified some central elements in the sufficiency literature that are central in a politics for sufficiency. And I have also performed like an overview of current policy strategies and activities in Sweden in the areas of waste prevention and sustainable consumption. And some results from that study, well, I can say that it reveals that there is a lot of sufficiency thinking going on kind of undercover among public officials working within these fields, but they hide it, so to speak, with other words and other phrasing in order to not scare away potential collaborators and so on. But yeah, there's also, so what I do is kind of provide a sufficiency diagnosis, so to speak, of current Swedish strategies and activities. And for those of you who are here in Linköping, I will talk more about this in the Green Room seminar on November 19th. And there is, of course, a lot more to say about this topic. And just like to finish off with, I think that one downside to the concept of sufficiency in terms of this mode of it being a mode of thinking and being ecological, is that it does not necessarily say anything about how we relate with nature or with non-humans. Of course, it can be claimed that it, in defining the responsibility for sufficiency as stepping back from one's excess environmental space, it's implicit that one should do so to leave room for others to take up their fair share of that limited space. But the literature on sufficiency is still very anthropocentric and does not really discuss this in terms of sharing that space also with non-humans. And I must admit that neither do I. So in regards to relating with nature, I believe that this is definitely something that further exploration of sufficiency from an environmental humanities perspective could contribute with. But I'm going to finish there. Thank you.